So, hello. Today we are joined again once more by Ute Heggen. Welcome back, Ute. Lovely to have you
Oh,
back.
it's wonderful
W-
to be back. I love everything that you put out, and it's great to see you again. Yes.
Ew.
Should I explain a
Yeah.
little bit about who I am for those who didn't see the other one?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. Okay. So I am a trans widow, just like Una Jane. And also, this occurred, my discovery of my now ex-husband's cross-dressing life and all of that was over 30 years ago. And I now collect the only data in the world on the experiences of women whose husbands suddenly became demanding. Suddenly, their secret cross-dressing life has been either revealed or discovered, and um, and now I have a total of 72 women answering my survey, which I now call the Heggen survey, um, of 20 questions to ask a trans widow. And my book, my memoir that I published, is called In the Curated Woods, True Tales from a Grass Widow. And it is available from iUniverse in a very inexpensive ebook form, as well as this soft cover. And it is available all over the world. I know people in the UK have gotten the hardcover
I've
copy.
got it.
You do? Oh,
Yes,
I
I've
mean,
got
it's
it.
actually soft cover. Yes, yes. Oh, wow.
Yes, look.
There we go. We
I
can
haven't
hold
read
it
it
up both
yet,
at the
but
same time.
yeah,
Yes,
I
well,
haven't read it yet. I have to admit, but I
yes,
have had a look at the pictures because,
yes.
yeah, it's really good. And that is one of the things that we're going to talk about today is like the well-being side of things because, this stuff can be really, really heavy. I'm sure
What
you will
is?
agree with that.
It's
Yeah, it's
absolutely very heavy, and one of the reasons that you will have people challenge you, both these men like Una Jane's and my ex-husband, and their allies or whatever, the reason you'll have these challenges is because people have been misled by the psychologists and psychiatrists and gender therapists and so on. And they truly believe that this is the way to help someone who has cross-sex ideation. And they've been exposed to all this captured language. It's very interesting. I'm watching the evolution of quite a few formerly affirming therapists now. Uh,
really,
st yeah, Stella O'Malley, the Irish therapist who now
yeah, yeah.
has a YouTube channel called Beyond Gender, has really evolved her thinking in the last 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah, I used to get into things with her in the comments.
Okay, so did
And
she
yeah,
formally affirm then in her
she
therapy?
thought that there must be uh, people who are true trans, and we just have to figure out better diagnostic tools and tests. And
Right.
now, after all of the communication that she has had with detransitioners, she doesn't at all specialize or, express an interest in trans widows. Uh, she's mostly been concerning herself with the kids and has an organization called GenSpect, which in September is going to have a meeting in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Okay.
I don't go to these things, but it's going to be interesting because some people who have been affiliated with her uh, have so-called transitioned and stuff like that and consider themselves to be true trans, and she's just she's just been convinced by the formerly affirming doctors who have changed their mind and by the detransitioners who went through, in many cases, they went through some kind of rather lengthy formal process, although many of them just get the one appointment diagnosis. Um, And it's it's impossible to know who will not detransition. And what they're seeing now with the detransitioners is that there are patterns of 7 to 10 years after medicalizing, especially for these kids when they hit their late 20s or around 30. And for the females, I think it's possibly that some maternal instincts are kicking in, and these unfortunate girls have completely altered their bodies and they are now infertile.
Yeah.
So, um, but I do want to, I wanted to mention a few things about Una Jane. I know that she's
Yeah, yeah.
also one of the trans widows like me who has appeared in the documentary by auteur Vaishnavi Sundar, which can be viewed for free at Lime, like the citrus fruit, Lime Soda Films YouTube channel,
Put the
Behind
link
the
in the
Looking Glass.
notes
Yes. Yeah,
behind the
Behind
looking
the
glass.
Looking
Yeah.
Glass. And one of the things that impressed me quite a bit in this recent interview with Una Jane is she had the luxury that her husband either abdicated really any responsibility for the kids when they split. In any case, the kids didn't. I think she had a son and a daughter, and they did not spend a lot of time with him. And so she was able to, without being concerned that she might have custody taken away or something like that, she was able to look at the communication that this father, who suddenly is saying he thinks he's a woman, that he was having with their young children, like emails,
Yeah.
that type of thing.
Yeah.
And she was able to go through his messaging and point out, this is a sentence that expresses something that is not true. And he is trying to get you to believe something that is not true, and that's gaslighting.
Yeah.
And this is him being manipulative. And the thing is, she really, she was really her children's therapist. I was unable to do that because my ex, this is back in the 1990s, I discovered his cross-dressing diaries in 1991, and then finally initiated the divorce in 1995. I had a period when I left in 1991. Then he coerced me to come back and said that he had detransitioned, and he threatened me um, that he would get custody of the children if I sued for divorce on the grounds that he had this alter ego and was not the person I married and was doing all of these secret activities of cross dressing. Because I found these 3 diaries, sketchbook format, all filled, 3 of them. So I figured out it had to have gone back into my second pregnancy. So he was in a graduate program and he worked for an academic organization, and all those business trips, I believe, were or a good portion of them, I think, had extra days on them so that he could go out cross-dressing, or else they weren't business trips at all. He wasn't going to some meeting. I didn't have all these ways of looking it up and stuff. This was kind of before the internet and
Yeah.
so on.
Of course.
And so, I was really held in the dark for a long time. And I couldn't use words like gaslighting or manipulative with my children because I think that they would have gone back to him every other weekend, and
Yeah.
he had like, there was like this chunk of time. That's what he fought for. Like every other week, he had 4 days with them, which
Yeah.
I said was too much, and I still believe is too much. And I think that, okay, if you say that these guys, excuse me, are um, are suicidal, then why should the courts be pressuring the mothers that we're supposed to give joint custody to someone who is so severely psychiatrically ill that he needs to cut off functioning body parts and he needs to have a new name for himself and completely is turning, down this path to a completely different persona. And I call it ideating an opposite sex persona, or for the men, ideating a female persona, because it is in your head. It's
Yeah.
there is no proof through brain scans or any kind of physical testing that this has a uh, a genetic basis, or that it has any kind of physical manifestation in your body of this. Typically now in my data with the younger trans widows, usually the dude is addicted to this pornography, and it's kind of rampant in the tech world, which should tell us something, because they resist the idea that it's social contagion, but it absolutely is social contagion. And and you were just saying that someone who is the sibling of had contacted you, and it is very, very tricky for
Yeah.
everyone in the family,
Mhm.
and the parents often get coerced into validating this idea. They're told that their child is likely to become suicidal if you don't affirm them. But, what these people really need is honesty. What my ex-husband needed was to be told, instead of he received in 19 it was in a sworn affidavit. It was probably in sometime before 1991. He was seeing this, kind of uncertified, qualified, uncredentialed, so-called gender therapist. And then he was supposedly definitively diagnosed as transsexual. She used those words. And this was by a PhD psychologist who is now decertified. Um, she wrote a sworn affidavit, which she submitted into the court during our divorce, saying that she diagnosed him on July 20th of 1993 as um, transsexual in the first appointment. So she didn't, there was like he had already detransitioned for a time. There was obviously, uncertainty going on, and y- you know, a lot going on, right? A lot of confusion
Yeah.
going on. And they weren't asking him about his childhood, during which his father had physically abused him. He would whip the kids with his belt for
Your
a
children.
minor. The No, not my children. My
Oh,
ex,
his
Nettie.
dad. Yeah, sorry.
I've given him the pen name Nettie. Nettie's
Yeah.
father was I think he had OCD or something like that. He was very compulsive about certain things
Yeah.
in their house, and you had to load the dishwasher a certain way, and if he found that it wasn't done that way, he would take everything out and do it over again. And everything,
Yeah.
it was that stuff about the place where things are. And so I think it was either some kind of high functioning autism, or else uh OCD, obsessive compulsive
Yeah.
disorder. And so, and if the kids laughed at something that he didn't understand, he would smack them with his belt. This is a very fearful, traumatic experience for a child, to have to be standing there shaking in fear while the father unloops his belt out of his pants. And I think he even made the kids take down their pants sometimes, which makes it a psychosexual experience for the children. And my understanding is that he stopped that by the time the third child in this family that later had four children, he stopped abusing, like he didn't abuse the younger two. It was the older two. Um, and it's possible that maybe he was doing better in his career and the stress of supporting a family was less or what, for whatever reason, or maybe the mother finally stopped it. But see, I have seen in so many backstories of these men who ideate a female persona, um, that they had, number one, a difficult relationship with their father, and number two, had been either sexually or physically abused and had a lot of trauma and chaos in their childhoods. And so anyone else coming to a therapist, to deal with things that are difficult in their psychological, emotional life, you would immediately be giving a history of your life starting from your earliest memories.
Yeah,
And
that's what I do.
instead, yeah, and that's what, everyone is supposed to do, right? But unfortunately, when the trans um, puzzle piece is inserted into this jigsaw, then it becomes the thing. And on some level, I can say, if I'm trying to be generous, that um, I can give some grace to these practitioners who believe that putting these patients on this track to taking hormones and surgeries and changing up their body and taking all kind of risks with their health, um, they think that, oh, this is this mental illness that I can just treat and it will be healed. They have this problem that they were born in the wrong body and it's this rare thing, but we're these wonderful diagnosticians who we know the right way to handle this, and just it doesn't matter, for the rest of the family. They're going to be shocked and everything, but we have to, in quotes, educate them. Right. And I know, for example, and this psychologist, she gave a whole bunch of information in a sworn affidavit saying that she spent something like 20 hours in sessions with his parents after he decided he's going to have the surgeries. Now, uh, this, so I would assume that no one spoke about the abusive behavior of the father towards Nettie when he was little. And this
Yeah,
was the secret that, I feel that Nettie had resentment. I mean, when I first met him, he hated his father. He
yeah,
absolutely hated his father. And he was also very resentful and sometimes critical of his mother, which I can understand because she didn't protect them.
yeah,
I don't just completely blame her, but uh, I think on some level she had to have known that although back in the 1950s parents were spanking their children and stuff, she must have known that her husband finding an excuse, a flimsy excuse to suddenly be smacking their oldest child, who was Nettie, and his younger sister, who was a little less than 2 years younger than him. And they had stories about how they figured out when he seemed like he was stalking around, ready to, you know, blow a gasket. They would get some children's books and stick them down the back of their pants and say, well, you can give me that whipping, but it's not going to hurt me because I put a book down the back of my pants. I mean, you know, I'm I'm an early childhood specialist. I have more than 20 years in kindergarten and pre-K and nursery school classrooms. And I know that this is abuse. This is really unwise. behavior. And when I went back, when Nettie coerced me into coming back and said he had detransitioned and made those threats that he would say that I made this all up because I didn't have any proof. Um, where was I going with this? I asked him, good, I'm glad I remembered. You know how it is when you're
Yeah.
recounting this kind of personal history that you like
Yeah.
kind of get lost among all the doors and all the blind alleys and the dark tunnels and
Yeah,
all that
because there's
stuff.
so
Yeah.
much, isn't there?
Right, right. But I had said to him as a condition to returning with the children that he discuss the abuse in his childhood and get a therapist who is a specialist in treating someone with childhood trauma. And I mean, sometimes I think back and I think, okay, I should have said that you have to start this before I come back. You have to give permission for us to have a telephone session with this person so that I can be convinced that this is being handled. And it that sort of turns into something where, oh, now it's my fault. I could have saved him or something if I had only insisted that he do
Yeah.
that. But of course, then after I got back, he never did that.
Mm.
And there we are, just living together and going along and going along. And suddenly he shaved off his beard. Not that a beard matters anymore, I guess, but it mattered at the time. And it just, I was walking on eggshells. I was on tenterhooks um, the entire time that after returning in January of 1990. Oh, so I discovered it in 1992, right? And I think I might have said 1991, but it was 1992, and I went back in January of 1993. So I was just gone for a few months. The discovery had happened that past August of 1992. And somehow I held it together. I didn't start having like the really obvious PTSD symptoms until after I discovered in 1995 then that he was taking estrogen. He was intending to be on this trans train of planning surgeries. And it wasn't even the 2-year thing like the Blanchard protocol. Uh,
So
of
were you divorced at that point?
No, the
No, you still.
divorce did not come through until 1998 because, and the judge was absolutely damaging to me and the children because I think he kept on delaying our hearings and so on. And we had a custody battle, a full-blown battle about custody. He wanted custody, which is crazy. Um, and he wanted joint custody, and they just put all this pressure. And in a lot of the sort of liberal places, the mother gets an extreme pressure to do joint custody and have a schedule of every other week, which is really not good for the kids.
And that's
So,
fashionable now. It's
right.
like all couples are like that now.
I guess so. All divorcing
Yeah,
couples do that. I mean, if the people are sensible, I think maybe it can be okay. I'm pretty old-fashioned, and I think as long as the mother is, well in mind and body, that the children really should spend the majority of the time with the mother. I know
I
that's
agree.
considered,
It's no, and
old-fashioned and sexist, but
I get a lot of pushback with that because I think they've undermined the role of mother
yes,
on purpose. Um,
yes.
and it's been creeping in for a long time,
Hmm.
and it's just a gut, really strong feeling that I have that children should be with their mother.
Yes. And I think somehow all of I think I sort of staved off getting PTSD until after the children were older because I was with them most of the time.
Yeah.
I went into teaching, so I had weekends off, didn't have to travel, was able to pick them up from school, stuff like that. And I think all of the really physical contact, all of that proprioceptive, input that I was having from mothering my children was keeping me from getting the PTSD and I would say by the time I got the divorce, 1998, then uh, some things kicked in and I went through more than 10 years not realizing that I had it
Yeah.
because I went to I did go to a therapist mostly because I went to this guy who was a specialist on boys with absent fathers. So this wasn't, but he didn't do family therapy. And I couldn't get anyone to do family therapy. This was in New York City, uh, because uh, even though I had full custody and I would show, I tried this a couple of times to do family custody, just me and the kids. Um, and so that, a professional could talk to them about, their feelings of abandonment and their traumas and all of that, because they very much felt that my older son had, I had to get him into a very good and expensive, psychologist because he had suicidal ideation, which is actually in my dad a rather, strikingly common in the out of the 72 trans widows that I have data on, 38 of us are, mothers of children, and, 7 or 8 of them expressed suicidal ideation, including 3 who, made serious attempts and had to be hospitalized. And in 0 of these cases, did that father, who doesn't want to be called dad anymore, participate in any of the children's follow up therapy. So it wasn't until 2012 that I realized these, uh, I thought I had chest pain. I had to go through this whole cardiac uh, testing, and there I was, I was using exercise to try to run away from the post-traumatic stress syndrome symptoms. And it was pretty successful. I remember there was this cardiologist who didn't really know anything about, my background. He was just somebody I got sent to. And the thing is, my everything, all of my tests, my literally my cholesterol and my heart rate and my stress test, when you're walking on the treadmill and all this with all these electrodes on your chest. I mean, I came out really, really healthy physically. And I
Yeah.
remember like a technician saying, "Wow, you're kind of a young woman. Why, we usually see these old men having this test. Why are you here?" And
Yeah.
I actually said, "Well, because my ex-husband had a so-called sex change operation, and I have panic attacks, which feel like a heart attack or something." But when I wrote my book, first of all, I realized that I have at that point, so this is like 25 years later, I wrote this memoir and I realized I have been running and running and running from these symptoms and using exercise as a way to outrun, the panic attacks and these feelings of stress like in my throat. I think that's the vagus nerve, the nerve that goes from your
Yeah.
brain to your gut, which has to do with the fight or flight impulses in stress situations. And I realized, I think I have this. And I got a diagnosis from a psychiatrist, very expensive psychiatrist, who said, "Yeah, of course this gave you post-traumatic stress disorder. Of course it did. Because
Yeah.
he's trying to steal your identity, like this guy." And this was in 2012. And I have been in my book actually quite a lot. I'm not just telling these, you know, crazy histories.
Hmm.
In my book, I'm also uh, fortunate that I was able to buy this property after I took early retirement and sell my apartment in New York City. So I'm kind of financially stable, living a pretty quiet, low expense life, but doing a lot of gardening. There are my flowers, my dahlias, and the phlox, and so on. And I really designed my healing program for myself, with kind of no help from the mental health profession, because what was happening by the late 20 teens and into the 2020s, what was happening in the field of mental health here, at least in this, in New York state. I'm in the Hudson Valley. I can't be more specific because of exactly the
Obviously.
threats like you and
Yeah.
I get.
Hmm.
I have the same things. The same
Yeah.
things. They tell me to jump off a tall building or walk in, traffic in the center line and all kind of nonsense. So, I found that feeling a steady connection to nature will uh, occupy my mind and take me away from the triggers.
Yeah.
And I have this whole idea that anyone who has been through excessive trauma. I mean, maybe normal traumas where you just like, gasp for a minute and then recover. That's just being a human being walking on the face of the earth. But when you've had someone try to steal your identity, which he literally put his name on the mother line of forms for the children, and I had to go around and correct this. And he said I was the nanny. There was a situation in front of my children where this mother from the school that they went to said, "Why are they calling you mom? You're the nanny." And I remember thinking, "Oh, I should be so pleased. She thinks I'm about 20 years younger than I actually am. I guess it must be this stress diet I've been on." But and I'm proud of myself that I can like laugh about it at this point,
Yeah. Yeah. You
because
have
you
to.
need the laughter. You need the
You
laughter.
do.
You need the good friends. But what happened with the mental health people that I was going to see to help me, start getting serious about how to do cognitive behavior therapy, how to, you know, get my mind and body back to a better neutral, right?
Yeah.
And I also saw that my children were, back in the late 20 teens, getting alienated from me. 2015 is the big year of, the pro trans ideology. And despite the fact that I got them through college with no loans, which is a big deal here in the US, and just, that I helped them so many ways financially and everything that their father didn't do for them. Nevertheless, I think they started to discover that being the son of a so-called trans woman, in quotes, gave them some kind of status. And my status in their eyes was very much going down. And so now and then of course after I let them know, because I'm very honest. I let them know that I was writing a memoir about this. I remember in maybe 2018 or 2019, my older son said to me, "Well, I think you really went through the worst of it, Mom." I talked a little bit about the stress I thought they had been through. And I realized both of them had sought out therapists, but like I surmised, not that they told me, but I surmised that um, what they're getting in therapy is the same thing that I was getting in therapy, which is like They're not saying your ex-husband. They're not saying he. They're saying, well, your former spouse, she, I mean, you have to realize she's been through so much. I mean, you don't have to do these things just to be the person you feel you are. And it's like, actually, I do. I do
Yeah.
have to prove who I am. I used to walk around with my passport, my children's birth certificates, the divorce papers that show that I have custody. Because until my younger son was in his senior year of high school, every single year, Nettie submitted these papers where he identified himself as the custodial parent, as the mother. and and it was like, and I feel like, look, he doesn't pass. He is so clearly throwing his voice in this very strange, high range that doesn't, it's like no one passes as the opposite sex as soon as you know the tells. But so I rejected 2 therapists, and this is a question in my survey, in the Heggen survey, 20 questions to ask a trans widow. One of the last questions in it is, did a therapist that you sought help for yourself, not marital or couples counseling, but for yourself, to work to recover, did you have a therapist say, well, your ex is a trans woman, so yes, you should be kind of acting like you used to be a lesbian, and you should say she, and this is what we do now. And basically, I mean, I had 2 therapists tell me that, and I said, okay. I mean, this was like at an interview where I'm like, am I going to hire you or whatever?
Yeah.
And there is in New York State and maybe some other Northeast US states, there is a health alliance organization that is very pro-trans for their mental health side. And it's like an insurance, it's facilities, but they, like they're tapped into the insurance payment,
Yeah.
structure.
Yeah.
And so they have all those policies that got adopted by the mental health world, which is that you always have to affirm the person. You always have to, admit that this person who is gaslighting you and manipulating you, Ute's truth, has had such a hard life, and you have to think of them like, even you're in your own therapy. And you're
It's
supposed to, yes,
ridiculous.
but think about, and it's like, okay, a lot of these guys, I'm finding from the data I'm collecting, a lot of these guys have done a lot of illegal drugs and they're alcoholics. And so it's like, oh, if you were getting divorced from this man it's a very sad case, but he's never going to be a recovered alcoholic. So you're divorcing him. And no one in the therapy world would say to you, yeah, but you have to think about him. Think about the trauma that he's battling with and how he has to sedate himself to just get through every day, you know? And because instead, the therapist would say, yeah, you don't want to be an enabler. And that's what the therapy world, um, of gender affirming cohort is saying, you have to enable. Yes, you should let him borrow your clothes. Yes, you should let him borrow your accessories. Yes, you should let him spend all of the family money on his designer shoes and handbags because, of course, the designer shoes and handbags, they make your feet look smaller and your hands look smaller, and they hide that you have that male brow and that big head and that Adam's apple. If you wear the right clothes, people will know that you went to, Lord and Taylor to get these, where they probably have specially trained staff, for the men who want the women's clothes.
It's unbelievable though, because
Yeah.
like the kind of training that I did, it's called person-centered. That like I mean
Yes.
I use lots of different tools, but my training was person-centered counseling. And that means that you put the person who you're seeing in the center of everything and it's about them. It's not about everybody else, although obviously it is because you bring other people in because they are part of that person's life. But like they are the center.
Yes.
And then yet I don't know if you've heard about my recent troubles with my professional
Oh,
body.
oh, do tell a little bit about that. You mentioned it, but
Yeah.
do tell us about this.
So I've been quite active on LinkedIn since the Supreme Court judgment. I mean, I
Uh,
have like mentioned this, like, and
mhm.
I'd dip in and out of LinkedIn, but
Right.
since the Supreme
Yes, and
Court judgment,
I'm just gonna interject here for anybody who isn't in the UK that the High Court in it was actually Scotland, right? But
yeah,
it
but it applies
applies
everywhere.
to the whole United Kingdom, is affirming that biological sex is male and female, and that, in quotes, trans women, so called, are men.
Yes,
And that women, because of our specific biological needs, we are entitled to single sex women and girls only spaces, sports teams, groups,
absolutely.
etc. Yeah.
And they clarified the law, so nothing's changed. But since that happened, all of the DEI people on LinkedIn were coming out and saying they were going to defy the Supreme Court judgment openly. So I became quite active. There was lots of us at like since I stood in the election and between then and now, I've kind of been building my network and stuff, but I hadn't really posted very much or commented very much. I had a bit, but the Supreme Court judgment, it was intense. I mean, there was a lot of things to talk about and
Yes.
challenge. So that's what I've
Mm-hmm.
been doing. And
Yes.
so I upset a few people on there and they complained about me. So there was four altogether who complained. It started off with one. I suspect they all probably know each other. And I was suspended from my professional body. Now, thankfully, because I'm self-employed, I don't really need to be in a professional body. I can practice without it.
Right.
But lots of therapists, lots of counselors like me who have jobs, they need that professional body. They wouldn't be employed without it. Like,
But listen, let me tell you, I honestly believe that if you start developing a specialty for the family members and coworkers of these demanding men, particularly, and some of these girls who say that they're male are also really demanding, aggressive, um, you know, it's too much.
yeah,
And it's very hard to work with these people or live with them.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think there's this whole new world to navigate because of resettling into biological reality. And as well, detransitioners are going to be in need, serious need of good mental health,
Yeah,
which I can sort of then segue into my beliefs about reconnecting mind and body, and using especially, I found cognitive behavior therapy to be very helpful for me because I would get into these negative spirals with thinking and then relive the past and all that stuff.
yeah.
And because of the
So
work I'm
yeah,
doing, I
I
do
use some of those
relive.
tools as well.
Right. Yeah. And so it's this whole thing about recognizing when you have a pattern that
Uh-huh.
it's not helping you, and you
It's
need to
about
just, you
one
know,
of my favorite tools is Socratic questioning. So you ask, is that real? Is that true? What if that wasn't the case? What else is going on?
right.
You ask like logical questions
Yeah.
and then you challenge what your mind's coming out with.
Yeah. And I think that in order, this is what I tell the trans widows who contact me, who are often really in a dire place. I mean,
Yeah.
there are a few who committed suicide. There are a few trans widows who committed suicide. I know of about 4 around the world. And
So sad.
yeah.
But I can
And
understand
yeah.
that
Yes,
it's,
but and the thing is, I guess I was raised with a really strong traditional religious upbringing. To me, suicide is against God. And also I had, however, who had the same religious upbringing. My father's second cousin did. And I remember being so upset because she was closer to my age, even though she was my father's second cousin. So she was the second cousin once removed, because she was in my father's generation. Um, and you know, the suicidal person does not think about what all the survivors are left with. But I personally think that because of all this overtalk, overemphasis on suicidal ideation, that we really need to bring up the point that you will be causing pain to other people for the rest of their lives, and some of them you don't even know, because the person who finds your body might not know you. And this whole thing about, going in front of a moving vehicle or something, like, there are bus drivers who have a heart attack because they couldn't stop in time. How dare you? I'm sorry. It's like, no, you
yeah,
snap yourself right out of that. Don't think about that unless you are terminally ill and you are reaching the end. That I feel very strongly about that. And I feel that, you know, because it is also part of this social contagion. And my ex-husband used that emotional blackmail on me,
yeah.
you know, and the world is using that
They are.
emotional blackmail
It's
on me.
just not right, is it?
The left wing here in the United States is using that emotional blackmail on me and all of the trans widows that I collect information on, and all of the children that these men fathered. And the whole sexual fetish part of this is not at all being addressed or honestly discussed. Like, I was pressured. This is another question from my survey. I was pressured by the one of the team that my ex Nettie was, working with. Um, I got permission to meet one of them, and it was mostly to go and say, "You're not going to mold me into someone who I am not. He has deceived me and spent money, lied about where he was, and been exceedingly rude to me and uncaring and unloving. And I'm here to tell you that you need to accept this, because we were still living together. I hadn't gotten him out yet. Um, he is coming back from your sessions, giving me the impression that during your little 45-minute therapy hour, all you're talking about is how to get Ute to do what you want her to do, which includes going to a sex toy store and getting a few pieces of equipment, going to, and at the same sex toy store, getting some kind of, at that time, it was, the big videos, the whatever they're called. I'm supposed to watch pornography videos so that I can learn how to play a part of his sissy porn something scenario. And I knew,
That
because
is so unethical.
I know. I know. I finally, just to touch base once in a while, twice a year, whatever, I have this psychiatrist that I have to write a check to and pay a ton of money, because these people in this country don't take any insurance and stuff. Um, and I mean, we have these rather short appointments that are even, remote still. I don't get this. But anyway, I just in case I need, some medication or something, which I'm really not on much now. Thank goodness. I don't believe in SSRIs. They just numb everything.
Yeah.
Uh, so, um, I told him about this. last year. And he said, "That's coercion." And I said, "I know that. That's why I got divorced. I'm not going to have my husband coercing me. And he's got a team of
Helping him how to do it.
help, yes, working on me because he specifically went to that team because they claimed that they kept the marriages together. They helped the woman to understand she just needed to do this, and she actually must be somewhat at least bisexual because didn't she see his feminine
Yeah,
qualities? And, it's
yeah,
like, look, they are the little man behind the curtain. We have, this is the yellow brick road. This is
yeah.
just, none of this is real. And, I think some formerly affirming therapists are now saying, okay, I think it was a medical misadventure and this diagnosis doesn't really have very much validity because there are individuals who detransition after convincing everyone that they were true trans, they were transition so-called for 30 years, and then they finally hung it all up, hung those lingerie and frilly dresses on the hook again and said, this is all a charade. I am exhausted from trying to pass when I know I don't. Um, and so uh, they detransition like in their 70s.
Yeah,
There's like in my data, there are 2 out of 72 men. And who knows how many more there will be. A lot of this is just recently that happened to the trans widows I've collected their information. But the older ones, there are 2 men, 2 of the husbands detransitioned. And one of them committed suicide after he detransitioned. And
because
then
he regretted.
in that liberal area where she lives, people blamed her and it's like, come on, you know, you know, you understand, everyone understands that if your spouse, that you fell in love with their physical being along with what you like about their personality and their intellect, if they change everything, first of all, then they become narcissists. So it's this
Yeah,
constant, they're gathering narcissistic fuel from you all the time. I mean, when
that's
you see
exhausting as well.
when you see these photo shoots of the women who stay with this husband who's looks like, Bruce Caitlyn Jenner, some big bloke, and typically I'm sort of like, I can go through the list of, is it Paxil? Is it Lexapro? Is it Prozac? What the hell do they have this poor woman on? Because her eyes are dead.
Yeah,
And she might be looking all nice because she's insisted, fair and square, I get to spend the same money on clothes that you do. But whereas I wonder if both these husbands, look, you're not going to stay married whether or not he detransitions, but uh, if they followed the Ute Heggen schedule of doing everything you can to make sure that you're going to get enough sleep, because with these kids, they're not sleeping.
yeah,
Their whole mental state is jangled because they're not getting enough sleep. They're online. They're not living a normal life with both feet on the ground, touch grass.
yeah.
And as soon as I began gardening and got away from the unfortunately stressful environment of teaching kindergarten,
Mhm.
because it became way too academic, and then you've got all this pressure. You're supposed to teach the gender unicorn and so on. So I fortunately had paid off most of my New York City, Brooklyn apartment and was able to sell it and then have financial stability. I worked after I moved upstate for a couple more years. But then during the shutdowns of COVID, I just said, I'm going to be fully retired. That's just going to be it. I'm managing one way or another. Um, so I mean, that's the first thing that I tell these women who get in touch with me is figure out, some way of seeing through this financially. You might have to ask relatives for help.
Yeah.
Um, and and then the Ute Heggen schedule is getting enough sleep, making sure you eat well. You know, you I can tell, for myself if I start cooking again after feeling like really stressed out um and not eating as well because I'm eating takeout food or whatever, I can just tell, things are kind of coming back. And that's an important thing too, is if you feel like, okay, I've just kind of been frenetic for a while and I'm not doing all the things that I should to get myself back to a good mind body neutral,
Hmm.
then, you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to find the right time to take a break and uh, uh, reel it back in. And of course, I strongly believe in gardening, and I think I want my legacy to be plant the flowers, then count the butterflies.
Yeah.
And I'm literally doing that all over my little town because I found a whole bunch of places where I can just easily, stick in a few things and say, listen, if you water it, it'll look really good. And so I'm like, uh, do you know the American folk tale of Johnny Appleseed?
Don't
Um,
think so.
okay, so Johnny Appleseed, he was actually a real person, but he went around, getting people to plant apple trees. And there's this whole kind of legendary thing about him, like he wore a pot on his head to cook the apples, and he just traveled around with a stick and a sack on his back and all this kind of thing. Anyway, but he spread. I guess he was a real person, and he spread the cultivation of apple trees. Certainly around the middle west of the United States. So I feel like I'm Ute Appleseed. I'm Ute Flower Seed, actually. And I'm saying, you have to give people the joy of seeing butterflies. And like there's this really kind of barren area next to where a train goes through town, and I got people to start. It's very sunny, so they started a sunflower garden, and I've never, in all my times when I bicycled by for the 8 years I've been living here, I never saw bees or butterflies or birds, and now I'm seeing all three over there. And and so you know, finding some place where you can grow things, even if it's helping an elderly neighbor, even if you live in an apartment, but you know someone who has a yard, there are all sorts of neglected little corners where you can just stick in a pocket garden. And, um, that's the secret life to have, is starting little pocket gardens in little places and then bicycling past it with a bottle of water and making sure and seeing if, anybody noticed. And so so that's this healthy life that I have. And then on my channel, Trans Widow Ute Heggen on YouTube, I have a playlist which I think I call Wellness Movements. And I sent you a link to one of my short little things. And I'm a
Yeah, I
I'm a
watched
former
that.
professional dancer. I quit when I was 28 because my feet. I'm a normal civilian, but I can't jump anymore. I can't do all the dance stuff anymore because my feet started giving me constant pain. And so, I was married to Nettie already, and then I said, let's have kids, and then we did. And then when our younger child was 1, I discovered um, his cross-dressing diaries, and just the sense of betrayal that you have to know that you were at home with the toddler, pregnant, 7 months pregnant, alone in the middle of Brooklyn. Not a terrible neighborhood, but it's the city.
Yeah.
He left you alone when you're 7 months pregnant, and now you find out it wasn't a business meeting. He was spending money After all the scrimping and saving and careful cooking and all this you're doing, he's spending money on hotels and clothes that he's then using twice and throwing away. And the thing is, I honestly believe that if a person who has what I call cross-sex ideation, or it's also been called recently by a New York City psychologist named Elliot Kamenetsky, he says it is identity-based obsessive compulsive disorder, which I think makes a lot of sense because you do, by necessity, you are constantly checking yourself in the mirror if you're trying to present as the opposite sex. So, and this is the other thing is because of the affirmation culture, they will never know if they're convincing to people because people are like constantly encouraging them. You
Yeah.
know, when Nettie was doing this and our younger son was 5 years old, he came back after a weekend over there saying, Mom, everybody's lying. When we leave a store with Nettie, um, the people say, okay, guys, be good to your mom. And the thing is, those people in that ultra liberal neighborhood where he moved to, they know that he's probably the father of the children or that he's, not their mother. They know that. Yes, the
Of
Adam's
course, it's
apple, the
obvious.
brows, the voice, etc. But they have to do that to show that they're good people and they're going to affirm that. And I just feel like, you know, how about thanks for coming into our store. Enjoy your purchase. Just like,
Yeah.
why?
Yeah.
Why do you have to do that? So, so the thing is that, the children are starting to live with these lies. And then, that's all this, layers and layers of burden of weight on the mother, the trans widow, as well as the whole rest of the family. Um, and now, I mean, nobody's really trying to pass. I mean, it's so extreme now that people who were people who are homosexual who were sort of very pro-trans because that's the most vulnerable and we have to protect them. We're merely gay, blah blah blah. Those a lot of gay men and lesbians are really getting sick of this. They're just sick of it. They're
Yeah,
like,
they
no,
are.
we don't need this anymore. And
Yeah.
and they're not going to Pride anymore. It's taken over by the trans and all that stuff. So, um, while for me, due to the fact that I am, talking to people like you and gathering information about what women like me have been through, um, how I keep that from, burdening me and turning into more of this sort of physical stress that I'm carrying is I have a schedule. Oh, and I forgot to put this, I was going to bring it with me in my studio, but this is something that has been really, really good for me. Um, uh, there are these walking sticks that you can use, which were developed in the Scandinavian countries for summer training for the sport of cross-country skiing or Nordic
Yeah.
skiing.
Yeah.
And there's the biggest company that produces them is Lecky, Leki. And so I call them the Lecky sticks. And I find that no matter, what terrible thing I've heard from a young, fresh trans widow, and no matter how, if I'm feeling kind of blue about the fact that my children no longer talk to me and so on, um, if I go out and do that walking, it engages your upper body much more than just walking.
Yeah.
And there's this sort of the opposition of swinging your arms
Yeah.
is uh, a proprioceptive piece of it.
I
And
think there's some science behind that as well.
yeah, well, actually, there was a study at the University of Rochester here in New York State of older people who they had them all walking, and they were it was like quite elderly, like people in their 80s who were able to walk and walking in groups or walking alone. And they found that the on the cognitive tests that they were having them do, they the people who were walking in groups were doing so much better that they shut down the test anymore. They had proven that it's better to walk in groups. Walking and talking is good for you. Now, I'm mostly walking alone, so I'll go and talk to myself or I'll sing. Singing is really important too. And that's the bad thing about taking, opposite sex hormones. It ruins your voice for both
Yeah,
males and females. And I think you're not going to have a singing voice. So
yeah,
are we
absolutely.
already, we have a little bit more time, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So, another uh, thing that I've looked into with a few different sources is this idea about pressure points and like these places where, if you really consciously, apparently there's a lot in your fingers, like just, gentle pressure and kind of a pulling each fingertip can see, my theory is that, you know, this stress response that your body is having in the vagus nerve that makes you feel, some people have a tendency, if they have this, they have a tendency to overeat because that's kind of soothing to your
yeah,
throat. And I'm trying to avoid that because, as I said, I have these problems with my feet, so I shouldn't gain weight. Um, but all of these other things to do with places in your body. Like even there was this chiropractor who was saying, give yourself a self massage by putting your arm across the
yeah,
body, and all of that will distract and help your body to kind of resettle. I just think of it as the physical neutral. I mean, obviously, from this false concept that you can be born in the wrong body, how we perceive ourselves in our body is just so important. And I honestly think one reason that Nettie, in the beginning, I mean, I was 18 and he was 20 when we met. I think one reason that he was attracted to me um, was that I was so seriously dancing, all different forms of dance, modern ballet, this Eastern European folk dancing and stuff. And my mind body connection was very well expressed. And I think he was attracted to that, And he actually signed up for a ballet class. And and he even came to some ballet class that I was taking. It must have been an open class. And I remember thinking, no, you don't start seriously trying to do ballet, even if you're a man, when you're 21 years old. Like you could do it for fun, but don't think that you're going to be.
yeah,
And I look back and I think, okay, I think he was trying to perceive himself as a female dancer, right?
yeah,
Which is too bad because that interrupted the focus that he should have had on being grounded, centered in his body.
yeah,
And so I am fortunate that I had 14 years of dance training because I know that feeling grounded and centered in my body is the way for me to feel then that I have good mental health, that
yeah,
psychologically I'm in good shape. And another piece of this that is very clear in my movement playlist on my channel is the abdominals exercises. And I do all these exercises on the floor, which are pretty easy. I know a lot of people in the civilian world who haven't had a lot of dance training, will look at my things and say, oh, I don't know if I can do that. And my answer to that is, it's just you rolling around on the floor. You're not going to do
yeah,
anything wrong.
yeah,
Um, And my theory is, and I know this when I'm really, I try to do my exercises for at least 20 minutes, at least twice a day. And I know that when my abdominal wall, which is the largest uh, uh, um, muscle area of the whole body, because you have several layers. There's rectus abdominis, and there's the muscles that go across, which I can't remember their name. Anyway, there's like 4 layers of abdominal muscles. And if if when I'm walking and doing things outside, I feel a sense of tone
Yeah.
in my abdominal wall, then my brain doesn't have the time and the capacity to really be like, oh, you feel that horrible feeling in your throat again. Oh, the PTSD. Oh, this, you know, it's more like, oh, I feel uplifted and, this is good. I have to remember to do this, even though you could say, look, just walking could be enough, but I feel like, okay, it's really important to have strong abdominals for the sake of your balance as you get older. Um, and so this is, if I was a therapist and someone was coming to me, and I would say, yeah, we we can talk about your past and we can talk about all these traumas. Um, we have to be careful not to let that be the habit where you just regurgitate all this stuff and stay stuck. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, now you've analyzed this. Yeah, those people did a wrong thing. And, you can either respond differently to them if you want to, or to have, if it's your mother or something, you don't want to, sever contact. I think my children are suffering from severing contact with me. Um, and, uh, at this point, I just feel like I don't want to wallow in the suffering that this is causing me. I just kind
Absolutely.
of refuse. I refuse to wallow in this. And those trolls, those ones who come and tell us what we're supposed to do to ourselves.
Jump off a bride was the
Yeah.
latest one that I
Oh,
got told.
but don't you think that was a misspelling for
But
bridge?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, okay, what have you been smoking?
But
You
he
know,
also said that I should put a gun in my mouth and
oh,
shoot
oh, the same
myself.
one, something
Yeah.
Fox,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, my approach to that is first of all, when it's on my channel, I block that person from the channel because I don't want anyone who has already been abused by their husband to come find my channel and then see all this direct.
Yeah.
So I block them, and sometimes I even take off comments. Once in a while I got some religious thing, and people who want you to go to church or something like this, I just I remove the comments because I have to have this community that I'm cultivating. And but what's really important for me to be able to help other people and to deal with my life, I have to do my walking, I have to do my gardening, I have to do my abdominals exercises and my stretching so that my joints don't tighten up. And that's good. I feel good when I'm doing that. And I love this new channel that you have with the sounds because you can
Yeah.
turn on that, what's it called? Sanctuary something?
Sanctuary Sounds. So it's a
Sanctuary.
yeah, it's a faceless channel and
Yeah.
it's just music with video
Yes.
and it's repetitive and it's
Right.
just for the background and yeah, so because of what's happened to me with being suspended, I mean, it's
Yes.
been lifted now, but they've got the complaint left open in case these people want to go to the police.
Fant-
Um,
oh,
but anyway,
oh,
I've been feeling quite stressed about it, even though, like, on a practical level, it doesn't really affect me. Emotionally, it has. And so I've been putting that kind of music on, and I just
yeah.
thought, yeah, I
And
can
I think,
create that
and
myself.
I would say if you see any of the exercises on my playlist that you think you you can, you know, manage, training your body to do it or whatever, like just have
Yeah,
confidence that
yeah,
if you have walking where you're really paying attention to nature, making it into bird watching, or, you've got this beautiful seaside. where you
Yeah, I
are,
live at the
right?
beach.
And I do think that walking the same walk throughout the seasons and noticing all these little things and which birds are migrating and what kind of tide is coming right now and
It's mainly seagulls at the beach.
uh-huh, uh-huh. Well, maybe you may see, I mean, as the fall comes, you may see migrating birds too.
Well,
And
yeah,
I think that once you get yourself in tune with walking out somewhere and noticing the small seasonal changes and that type of thing, and training yourself not to ruminate, but to, have yourself looking towards the distance and looking towards what you notice close by. I have a cemetery near me where I walk. It's really like a park. And I like to
yeah,
do the sticks and stuff. I actually adopted a grave too. It's one of those stories of, a woman 200 years ago, having a very short life, but her family, she died when she was almost 17 in 1816. So she was born in 1799. And I put flowers at her grave because I want people to notice. I want
yeah,
people to notice, and be grateful that we have a
yeah,
longer life now, you
yeah,
know?
we do.
And it's kind of a beautiful stone. They really outdid themselves, making this monument to her. And
Yeah,
so, and whenever I've put it up, I always tell myself, start going on with your walk or going back home, but then turn around and look and see how it looks from a distance. And just having these little habits like that take you out of your rumination. It's really, really important. And it used to be when I first started, when I just had like 35 trans widows in my data collection. Um, I would kind of be taken back into my trauma
yeah,
through their trauma. And but I did develop this whole thing like I'm going all over giving everybody free advice saying, listen, you've got to do this and you've got to do this, you've got to stay strong. And oh, one thing I wanted to say, I don't stop me if I already really said this. I guess I did say this about Una Jane because she was able to point out to her children the
yeah,
gaslighting
yeah,
and the manipulation that he did. And my sense is her children have not alienated from her, now in
yeah. I did
adulthood.
ask her, but I don't think she wanted to talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm
it
not
can be
sure.
very difficult because
Yeah,
they can suddenly get the idea that, oh, she caused him more pain. And I mean, that's like this world that we live in right now. And for example, one of the things I appeared in, they wanted this younger woman who she was actually had remarried and she was having her fourth child and she lives in the Middle West here in the States. She was one of the women in Behind the Looking Glass and she was requested, to give her story in another venue. And then they came to me and they said she changed her mind. She just feels that her oldest child is entering middle school and somebody's gonna, make the connection, even if she's using a pen name, that that's her, and there's gonna
yeah,
be pressure on her children. Even though those kids have very little contact with their father. I mean, and it's just, I mean, it's going to all have to start shifting, recentering. I what I it's like a centrifuge. This whole movement is like a centrifuge. It has thrown people out of the center, and tossed them willy-nilly here and there. And even people who still say, oh, it's not a social contagion, and you don't, anyway, you don't even know. You walk by these people and you don't even know. It's like, look, no, I do know.
yeah. You
But
do.
yeah, but
Yeah,
in order to be able to collect this data, which now I see the patterns, it's almost like Okay, so he beat you up and he sexually assaulted you. All right, so he fits into that part of the pattern. Okay, that's a little over a third, somewhere between a third and a half, like 33 of 72 women. I'm like, it's no, it's really quite remarkable that no one has been asking us. So,
It's
and I
shocking,
recently,
actually.
I
It's shocking.
recently figured out something. I try to avoid stalking my children, my two sons online, but every once in a while I try to look them up to see if they've, said something. And I actually signed up for Instagram just so I could see if they have an Instagram because they seem to have closed up their Facebook pages. And so, but I found something um, that where some troll had figured out who my sons are and had um, claimed that my son is a transphobic author, which is what they call me. My son hasn't published a book. He doesn't even publish articles, right? Um, and so I'm realizing with a couple of things where, that those trolls that we've outlined now, uh, they work very hard. A lot of them are these men with a big tech background, so they can be a detective and find the family members. And so
Uh-huh.
um, I'm imagining that actually then if he found one son, he found the other. They have the same last name. And so one reason that they won't answer my phone calls or send me a Mother's Day card or anything is because they've been trolled and they've been accused of what I've done. And I think this just shows how the people in that world have really shredded the mother-child bond. They don't regard that as something sacrosanct, which of course it is.
I think that's happening on a wider scale as well. I don't think it's
Yes.
just like in this ideology, it's wider, it's society wide.
Yeah, unfortunately, especially I find the millennials, a friend of mine who's younger than me and still in the working world, she said, "Oh, I hear this all the time. These millennials are always talking, like these are people in their 30s now. They're always talking about how they went no contact with their parents." And I mean, the thing is, my situation is such that I had to rewrite a will, and there's not much of my estate which at this point is designated for my children. Because if I become old and enfeebled, let's say 30 years from now, when I'm almost 100 years old or something, um, I wouldn't, I can't allow it to be that they, after all this, would realize they could take control of my house, my property, my bank accounts, my investment accounts, stuff like that, and sort of put me somewhere, you know?
So
And
you're trying
and
to
so
protect yourself.
yeah, I had to protect myself and it's actually my handyman who is a foster father and black guy. And he and his wife managed to be foster parents in New York State and refused to be affirming to any kind of cross-sex stuff. And they have fostered, dozens. It might be over the last 20 years that they've been foster parents for children who had to be taken away from violent or drug-infested situations. They've fostered probably over 50, children. And so,
Yeah.
you know, Jean and Pearl are going to get my house and they'll take care of me.
Yeah.
Gene doesn't want to talk about it. He's like, don't talk about that. You're going to. And I'm like, well, he was like, you're going to outlive me. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Uh, Then we
That's a
have to name
difficult decision to
somebody.
make, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
That
it
is a
was hard.
difficult
I mean, I made
decision.
it a long time ago. I made it several years ago, and I hope it's not like upsetting to you or to anyone who's hearing this because I've just come to accept it.
If
And
that's
that,
what
you
you've
know,
decided to do for your
yeah, that's what I've decided to
circumstances. It's
do. I mean,
personal.
it's not irrevocable, but I don't
Hmm.
think even if my children came knocking this afternoon on my door and said, "Oh, we're so sorry and we made a mistake and da da da," I
It's going to
wouldn't make
take
it
a lot
possible
to
for
put
them
things
to,
right.
yeah, I mean, maybe some of the money, but they're not going to get my house. I have to protect myself because their father is a money grubber, right?
Yeah.
He had a big tech job. He was the chief operating officer of a tech company, and he pretended that he was unemployed and convinced the court because they're so primed to believe this. And he skipped from paying child support.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, um, and I feel like the thing is, I don't want anyone to listen to what I have to say about this and think that I'm just laying my burden on other people.
Yeah.
I mean, among my friends, I don't really talk about this too much. I'm mostly talking about what's in bloom and my butterfly count, which is over 70
Absolutely.
for my favorite
Yeah.
butterfly so far this season.
Yeah.
But I'm saying it because I know that when trans widows see me being honest about what happened, then it gives them the freedom to tell what happened to them.
It's
Yeah.
going to be a while. Sorry. So
um,
you just talk about other stuff with your friends. Well, that's like a good thing to do, really, isn't it?
yes, and I joined a singing group. I joined this chorus, and I'm an alto, and it has the whole range. It's got men in it singing bass and tenor and so on, and it's mostly people who are considerably older than me, like in their late 70s and in their 80s. There's this one beautiful 90-year-old guy, Aegon. And yeah, oh, I love him. And um and only two of them know anything really about my backstory. And over at the building, that's one of my gardens over at the building. They're so happy with the sunflowers. They're so happy with the gardening. I'm like making these people happy. And I think that's another thing that can be important to cultivate if you are a trans widow or if you are a woman who has been in a domestic abuse situation or something like that, to cultivate a group of friends that you're just the regular person to them. They don't need to know that because you are strong. You do your pressure point things to get your body and mind back to a stable neutral. And then you have some normalcy, because,
Yeah, because you're more
yeah.
than a trans widow, you're a whole person.
Right. And I mean, the other reason I guess that I feel a an obligation to tell my story and to delve into this is because I'm an early childhood specialist. And the four stages of the Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget, his four stages of uh, of child development. I went and looked them all up again so I could rememorize them. Sensory motor, birth to 3, pre-operational, like these are, they can blend into each other. So,
Yeah, yeah.
3 to 7, pre-operational, uh, concrete operational, like 7 to 11, 11 to 14, formal operational. And that's the age at which you're able to start doing, algebra and all this symbolic work. And the fact is, no child in the sensory motor or pre-operational stage has the cognition to know what they're expressing, even if they do say, "I'm supposed to be a girl," that a boy says, or I was supposed to be a boy, call me Steven. that a girl says.
Mhm.
This does not comport with long accepted and generally unchallenged uh, theories of development.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And
And if they want to change it, they need to come up with the concrete evidence
well,
that it's
they
not
you
right.
know, what
They haven't.
what they've substituted is queer theory, which seeks to destroy the nuclear family.
It does.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so much so that some of these really nutcase people like Martina Rothblatt and John Stryker at the top of the, financial food chain in trans world, they're into this whole transhuman thing. They think we don't need mothers to have babies. They think that you can change sex and that, like, uh, we really have to hang on to our connection to nature, and our bodies are, of course, the
Definitely.
most immediate connection we have to nature. And
Yeah.
so, like, I taught 4 children in my 20 plus years who had cross-sex ideation. They all desisted. One of them was going through a high conflict divorce where the father had been um, and he was a boy. The father had been violent in the home, and there was a restraining order and all this stuff. And he said he's supposed to be a girl, and his mother acquiesced to let him wear pink shirts, but they were like boys' t-shirts, and he
Mhm.
stopped. Things settled down. I guess the father got some counseling, and his behavior settled down, and there was more normalcy. And I sort of noticed what was going on with him later on in the school world. He'd be in his 30s now. And there was another boy who said this. He wanted to differentiate himself from his older brother, I think. And maybe the parents had said something or implied that they wanted that second child to be a girl. And then there were 2 girls. One was quite severely emotionally sort of disabled. She had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and oppositional defiance disorder. So she had quite an alphabet soup um, of diagnoses. And we had to, like, accompany her to the bathroom because she would stand on the toilet seat, which is quite dangerous, and try to urinate standing up. But I think that's simply because her mother actually found her very difficult to deal with, and her father
Yeah.
was doing most of the parenting. And so
Yeah.
she saw she was identifying more with her father. I don't know too much about what happened to her. She was actually quite violent. Um,
Yeah.
and this was in pre-K, 4-year-old, very violent little girl. And then the other child was a twin in a set of 2 twin girls. They were not identical twins, they were fraternal twins, but she had an older half brother who got to go off with his father, who was a different man than her father. And he would come back from Rye Playland and talk about all the wonderful stuff he did with his dad. And so she thought, well, if I'm a boy, then maybe I can go along because that
Yeah.
dad, he wants a boy, right?
Mm.
She's 4 years
Yeah.
old. She comes in, call me Steven. She stopped after, less than 2 months. And my approach was she came in crying, and screaming and, don't call me Sarah. My name is Steven. Blah, blah, blah. And unfortunately, they had her sister in the same classroom, which they should have separated them. But in pre-K, a lot of times they keep them together. But in this case, they should have been separated because she was the quieter twin. Often with twins, one of them talks for the other one
Yeah.
and is more outgoing. So she was the quieter one, and so she was trying to differentiate herself from her sister, plus her half brother was having what she thought was a more fun life. Um, but what my approach was, I said, "Wow, did you have any breakfast this morning? I mean, maybe you woke up late and got rushed off to school. What did you have any dreams last night? Sometimes I dream about the kids. Like I just went into this whole but I
Mhm.
gave her attention and I said, "Yeah, I know this morning was kind of upsetting. Sometimes I wake up late. But I have to be in a good mood because here I am. I'm Miss Ute. I have to the show the show." I've arrived.
Mhm.
So so teaching was a good distraction actually from my own traumas because my
Yeah, because you
focus was
see,
totally I was on stage. I was and
I would
but in a
imagine you'd see a
yeah,
lot of different families in teaching.
yeah. And 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 then I would say, "Well, should we write mom and dad a note about what you want to bring in your lunch tomorrow? Maybe we need to." And so I focused on her and her needs, right? And at the end of this, when she decided she was like insisting on going to the bathroom with the boys, and I was like, "No, no, you're not going to do that." Mm-mm. Um, and I was just very firm about it. No standing on the toilet seat. No, no, that just, I can send you with the assistant teacher. You can go to the bathroom by yourself. You're going to go in. We had a children's bathroom. We didn't have even, a boys' bathroom with urinals for the little 4-year-olds. It's just
Yeah.
a few stalls and toilets and stuff. But at the end of this, she broke down crying and thanked me. And she was like, "Miss Uta, you loved me, and you're not mad at me? You're not mad at me for pitching such a fuss?" And I was like, "Well, some kids, they wake up on the wrong side of the bed. They didn't get enough sleep. It's my job. But you're Sarah now. Let's work on writing your name. Ah, I'm sure that there's a wonderful story about how you got that name." There was, and the
Yeah.
thing is, the mother, the mother was this uber liberal ahead of her time. This is in the early 2000s, like 2002 or something.
Mhm.
And the mother comes in and I saw this already. And so I knew when the mother came in to talk to me that, she's these people, they come in and when the drop off, like I'm not even having a private meeting with her. She's pushes me off into the corner and says, "I have to tell you about this. I think my child might be trans and I think, and I think we have to do this and this." And I said, "No, no, no, no." I said, "I'm going to tell you something about myself. My ex-husband did this. The father of my children did this. And that psychologist said it's so, so rare. You probably won't even meet anyone else in your life that is like this." And so I said, "No, no, no. Children pretend they come in. I had a
Yeah,
kid
they
last
do.
year who came in and said that she was little kitty and who said, or whatever they're called, like I don't even remember, little pony, little kitty, whatever it is. And I say, "Oh, did they send oats? Because that's what horses eat. Did they send oats in your lunchbox? No, it's a pastrami sandwich. I don't know if you're going to be able to eat that. You know, I might have to go out on when you guys go to physical education, I might have to go out and buy you some oatmeal so you can eat like a horse." This is from my father. My father would be like this.
Yeah.
And then, I would actually have them open their lunchbox, or we would look on the menu for what the school lunch was. And I say, "Oh, I heard that that's your favorite, but, maybe I'll send you down with a bag of oats. That's what horses eat."
Yeah.
And then they're like, "Oh, it's a joke. No, Miss Uta, come
I
on,
want me dinner.
no."
Uh-huh. Well, that's how you should handle it. I
Yeah.
just don't understand why anybody would do anything else. It's like, it's just,
Well, it's all about overcorrection, isn't it? Like a lot of things that we identify where we think something is wrong, then we overcorrect. My parents' generation spanked us. And so a lot of people in my generation overcorrected and didn't make any
discipline at all.
yeah. And so, a lot of people in the boomer generation have no restraint. They have no manners. And then they are raising, the millennial generation. I mean, at the time when my children still, liked me and loved me, I still think they love me.
They do love you.
Yeah,
They will.
yeah. But after college, they both thanked me because they realized that they were a lot more functional than their peers. First of all, they didn't have the stress of having taken out college loans because I was very, very cautious with money. I was, uh, it was almost like I was a miser. One of the things I had to work on actually in the therapy after I retired, um, was not to worry about money. I realized that was like this rumination spiral that I would let myself go on, even though I've gotten my children through college. I have a house that is all paid off. I've decided to live here without a car, which is extremely economical. And plus, it makes me walk everywhere, and things are mostly walking distance.
Yeah.
Public transportation here is not so good, so I'm not always, getting out to have a change of scenery, but I just sort of accept that and make my place beautiful and have a lot of things, projects to do outside. Um, but you, you just, I have to tell you, I'm very happy and grateful for this connection with you. And
Well,
I
that's nice to
honestly,
see.
your channel must have come up on my feed or something when you first started. And then I think I contacted you, didn't I? Is that
I
what I
can't
did?
remember how it happened. I
Yeah,
know that
or
was
maybe you
sometimes
contacted
chat in
me. I don't
some
know.
other
Yeah,
channels.
right.
Yeah.
Maybe in a
I
chat.
think I contacted you. I think,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah, I think someone suggested I get in touch with you, but I can't
okay.
remember, to be honest. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so I do have a strong sense of responsibility, and so I think I passed that on to my sons. And also there was a study that was actually in a teachers union publication. The teachers union is just
Terrible.
beyond hope at this point.
It
But
is here as well.
there was a study that had been made about parenting styles and whether children had to do chores in order to get their allowance. And it was some kind of longitudinal study, and they found that children whose allowance money was contingent on completing their chores, and if they didn't get their allowance money. Those kids graduated college in 4 years, um, got full-time jobs, and moved out from their parents. And this came at exactly the right time. My older son was probably about 12. And I said to them, and I was giving them $5 a week. It was really a pittance. And then I would give them extra if they did some other job. I would say, listen, there's pay for this project, da da da. And I also gave them $5 for every A that they got. And they would come to me. I started this when my younger son started middle school because he's pretty smart and he was able to get B's without working very hard. And so I was a little bit in shock, with his first middle school report card, and I said, "What is this? If you aren't learning all of the material to answer questions on a test or write a good paper, then, you know, you're going to be having holes in your learning. You have to work on, there might be some hard subject, but you really need to get the good grades again because they were always getting good grades in elementary school." And he literally said to me, there he is, this kid, he's 11, 12 years old, yeah, but mom, I don't have to really study. I can just like do what I remember. And I was like, you don't know how long that's going to work. And so I go to my dad and I'm like, Dad, he's so smart. He doesn't have to study. And like he's happy with B's. And my father said, give him some money for every good grade he gets. That's not hard. everybody who does a good job in the company I worked in, we got bonuses, and I and I was like, okay, it has the
Yeah.
grandpa seal of approval. And so I started paying them, and they would come to me because they knew I was kind of cheap, right? Like I would say, well, we don't have any money, or we don't have money for that, or all that stuff. and and they would come to me and say, see, Mom, you owe me, I figured it out, $35. And I would call up my father after this and say, listen, that's the best advice you ever gave me. And this is the best, I owed each of them $35. So I was like, this is the best $70 I have ever spent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's lovely as well.
Yeah.
So it's not all
So
doom and gloom, then you had some good times as well.
we did. And that's the thing in the book. I want you to know that at the end of every chapter is one of my happy stories of, something about my motherhood. I realized um, I organized it chapter by chapter. It was 9 months. I thought that was kind of symbolic. Um, from I guess September to June, and I realize that this might be hard to read, and I myself need to give myself a break. And I also want to document the happy stories. Like here's one about my
Yeah.
dad. Wisconsin. I'm from Wisconsin. We'd go out there every July for the whole month, and there are a lot of ice cream places. It's the dairy state. And so there's this great place in Madison called the Chocolate Shop, and they had a new flavor, which had way too much stuff in it. I wanted to name the flavor everything but the kitchen sink, but I knew that wouldn't be, a popular name. But they had a name the flavor contest. And they had little flyers for it. And so we would bicycle down to this ice cream place and take like a dozen of the flyers and think of some names. I would get them ice cream. I wouldn't let myself eat ice cream all the time, but I would get them some ice cream and and we would submit a few names. I think it had marshmallow stuff in it, which I can't stand, and chunks of chocolate and caramel. And it was really for my taste, it was everything but the kitchen sink. But but we kept thinking of names, and then we would take it home to my dad, who of course had been a salesman. And so of course he loved this, and he was thinking, I wish I had the list that he had made up, because he would spend, it was good for him. He was in his 80s already. He was getting arthritis, and it was getting difficult for him. And but this motivated him. Like he wanted to think of something funny, and he would be thinking about it even when we weren't there. And you know and so this was this running conversation for a whole month. And the thing is, they would ship monthly ice cream for a year to you
Wow.
in dry ice if you won. It ended up being called Heaps of Love, which I think is so lame. but 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 this was such a great story, and it's at the end of one of my chapters. And so I actually did, my older son does live in the same town. There's a rumor that he and his wife are maybe splitting up. So I don't even know if he lives at the same place anymore. Um, that's what I was doing my online snooping about. They both are not wearing their wedding rings anymore. And actually, a letter. I was sending him letters, and a letter got sent back with my daughter-in-law's, or maybe ex-daughter-in-law's, scrawl on it saying no longer at this address. Return to sender. So, but I took over. This was a year ago, or in last December. I dropped off a little gift bag with some homemade cookies, and I can't remember exactly what else, and a copy, and one of these, and a note about just turn to the end of every chapter, because every chapter ends with part of your childhood, and your father is not collecting these memories.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to preserve any of the memories that are from his so-called dead name life. And so my older son does, have a copy, I assume, of my memoir. And I mean, people go through so much. There's
I do.
I think it's important for me to recognize that there are many, many worse things than what I've gone through. What I've gone through is lousy, but I have not had a serious illness. I haven't had, I have to go to the dermatologist once a year for the skin cancer check because of my Scandinavian heritage and so on. But, you know, I had to stop dancing, but I can still walk. This is a sad thing. I don't swim anymore because at the local place, the Y, um, uh, they let men who think they're women into the women's change room. Uh, they're not supposed to now because of the executive orders of our current administration, but in this town in upstate New York, they're not going to enforce that. And I confirmed it with someone I saw who works over there. And I was like, look, I that will actually cause me stress.
Yeah.
Even if the locker room, as we call it, is empty. It will I will be stressed out about whether I'll see someone. But and I this is like, you get this if you're a sibling of or a mother of or a, trans widow. I wrote on my blog is uteheggen.substack.com. And, I can laugh about it now, but this was just too much. I had been gardening and I was like, oh, I don't feel like cooking dinner. I'm going to take myself out for a hamburger in a diner, good old American tradition. So, and I don't mind, going out by myself. I actually took paper and wrote 2 letters. I send letters in the mail. I have a cousin who's wonderful. He's a PhD psychologist, and he's really disgusted with what I've been through. And I had so I wrote 2 letters, one to a friend and one to my cousin. And but I'm sitting there, and then this group comes in that's some kind of a self-help group or they have some kind of a thing that they're doing, and now they're going out, for dinner together. And there was a dude, who was very, at first I thought, oh, he might just be very androgynous. He's wearing a thin spaghetti strap top with, you know, uh, but then I saw, his front of his chest, and he's growing little uh, breasts. I don't want little man boobs, right?
Moobs.
Moobs, right. And he's wearing these skinny jeans and sandals and he I don't know if you've heard of this person, McBride, who used to be Tim McBride. Here he's a congressperson from maybe
I
Maryland or
think I
something.
do. Yeah.
Yeah, and he got elected to Congress. So he's, I guess, the first so-called trans congressperson, and of course a real activist. He was going into schools, reading the books, the whole thing. And earlier material that he put out online looked like he was a gay guy.
Yeah.
Um, so this individual in the diner looked a lot like Tim/Sarah McBride, and I was like, I just went up to the server and I said, I'm going to have to move to the other side. First of all, it's kind of hard to be a single person and there's this whole group of people suddenly moving tables in the middle of the room. And thank goodness they had another side. So I just, moved over to the other side. But this guy was a real grifter. He was going around asking everyone in this group of about 15 people if he could stay with them at their house or if they had money so that they could help him pay rent somewhere. And it's like, um, Oh, and I said to myself, maybe he's not taking any estrogen. Maybe he's just, you know, confused, or maybe he says he's non-bi. Like, this is me. This is Ute, the eternal optimist. I'm like, maybe he's not ruining his body. Maybe he's not taking estrogen. Maybe he's going to get
Yeah,
over this. Maybe he's going to plant the flowers and then count the butterflies. But no, then he turned around and I saw his front. And I was like, yeah, he has to be taking estrogen. But he wasn't
yeah,
trying to change his voice at all. They don't seem to do that anymore. It's just, and these
yeah.
people were being, they were just all really affirming him, but everybody suddenly had a full house. They had their grandchildren staying with them. They had, cousins coming to visit. They're sorry, I just don't have any room. That was, I just felt like,
Any
oh, yeah,
excuse.
listen. Yeah. Because, I mean, that's kind of, what I would call chutzpah, that's a little bit gutsy to go around. Like, these people probably don't know each other that well. They're all, together because of some common interest or self-help thing that they're doing or something. Maybe it's a Tai Chi group. I don't know. So, but to go and ask if you can stay at someone's house, like, and so anyway,
Well, we've
yeah.
been talking for 2 hours. Can you believe
Yes.
it?
I think you're going to get a lot of good short ones for this. Yes.
Yeah, let's wind it up.
Yes.
But yeah,
Yes.
thank you so much for coming on. It's been lovely talking to you. I've enjoyed every minute of it, which is
Yeah.
why it's gone on twice as long as I usually go on, but because I just
I'm
couldn't.
very flattered.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah. Well, we can share troll stories. If you just have a little bit of time and we need to compare
yeah,
notes on the
yeah.
trolls and the
Well,
troll
yeah.
stories, it's like, don't let them get to you.
They don't upset
They're the
me. It
ones who
doesn't,
are
it's
messed up.
just, yeah, it doesn't upset me. But yeah, thank you for coming on.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
I just wanted to take a moment to speak directly to the women listening who might be struggling in silence. So maybe you're living with the fallout of a husband or partner who's suddenly decided he's a woman, leaving you feeling confused, coerced, or even pressured into things you never consented to. Maybe you're a mother with a daughter or a son who now says they're trans, and you're carrying the heartbreak of that loss without anyone around you really understanding. Or maybe you've been cancelled, silenced, or bullied in your workplace, in your family, or even online, and you're left questioning your reality, your confidence, and your sense of self. If any of that sounds familiar, I just want you to know that you're not alone, and you don't have to keep pushing through it on your own strength, because that's exactly why I offer counselling for women. It's a private, safe, and non-judgmental space where you can say the unsayable. And I know how hard it can be to put words to feelings of betrayal, grief, or anger, especially when the world around you just wants you to be quiet. In our sessions, you'll be heard, believed, and supported without judgment. My work is grounded in person-centered counselling, but I also bring in other tools like inner child work, trauma-informed approaches, and relational models to help you uncover what's really going on beneath the surface. Together we'll explore how the past is shaping the present, untangle the dynamics of coercive or narcissistic relationships, and give you space to grieve losses that others might dismiss or deny. The women that I work with often tell me that our sessions give them clarity, strength, and the ability to start making decisions that honour their own needs, sometimes for the first time in years. And so whether you're trying to rebuild after coercion, come to terms with ambiguous loss, or simply reconnect with who you are, therapy can be the place where you start to feel like yourself again. And I offer a free, no obligation consultation so that you can see if working together feels like the right fit. There's no pressure, just a chance to talk about what you need and how I might be able to help. You can find out more at kellyoliverdougal.co.uk. You deserve a space where you are truly heard, and if this speaks to you, I'd be honoured to walk alongside you on your journey of healing and strength. A massive percentage of people watching this channel are not subscribed. That's 86.5% of watchers are not subscribed to the channel. Please subscribe. It helps us to get more guests and reach more people who need help, and to make sure that women know that they are not alone.